This podcast is sponsored by Ramp. Look, there's feelings, and then there's the facts. If you're feeling like your finance team is bogged down in mundane manual tasks, the fact is, you need Ramp. Ramp is the corporate card that makes the expense process fast and easy. The moment your team makes a purchase, Ramp handles everything. Receipt collection and approvals, the works. With Ramp, you can cut your month-end close from 5 days to 1, customize approval workflows, and get complete control over every transaction. Facts. Over 25,000 businesses trust Ramp, including Shopify and the Boys and Girls Club of America, which is why they were just named #1 in spend management by G2. Facts. Start using Ramp and you'll have more time to spend scaling your business. And that'll feel really good. Upgrade to Ramp for free today and get $250 at ramp.com. That's ramp.com. RAMP.com.
Cards issued by Sutton Bank, members FDIC. Terms and conditions apply.
Coming up this season on DNA ID, a couple shot at a campground, a realtor waylaid at a home showing, a bookstore owner stabbed among her volumes, a young soldier dumped in a parking lot. What do all these tragic cases have in common? They are all cold cases solved after decades of frustration and futility by forensic genealogy. I'm Jess Betancourt, and in Season 2 of DNA ID, I'll bring you 24 more fascinating cases in which the killer eluded generations of investigators until science and some crafty genealogists cracked them at long last. Listen to DNA ID on your favorite podcast platform. New episodes drop every other Monday, starting January 10th, 2022.
You're listening to Missing Persons, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family,
DNA ID,
Beyond Bizarre True Crime,
Zodiac Speaking,
Scene of the Crime, 3 Men and a Mystery, and
All Things Crime.
All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its creators, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss a missing persons case on this podcast, please be sure to visit missingpersonspodcast.net. This episode may contain unsettling or disturbing subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Missing Persons, a podcast dedicated to spreading the word about people who have vanished under mysterious or unexplained circumstances, and the family members who are looking for answers. I'm Jess Betancourt.
And I'm Mike Morford. Together we created this podcast to help give a voice to people who continue to search for their missing loved ones, in some cases even after decades have gone by. In each episode, you'll hear from Jess giving listeners the backstory and the basic facts of the disappearance.
Then Mike will speak with someone who's intimately connected to the missing person, and his guest will share their story with us.
Please stay tuned at the conclusion of this episode to hear about our Patreon program and our commitment to help find people who have gone missing. We'll also share with you where you can find more information and how you can join our team and help our efforts. You'll get recommendations for other podcasts we think you'll enjoy, and more.
So sit back and enjoy this episode, and who knows, maybe you can help us find someone who's missing. Episode 43, Richard Halliday. Richard Halliday was adopted from Poland at age 5 by parents Patricia and Robert, who were stationed in Germany at the time. Richard spent much of his life living overseas with the military family, which moved around Europe quite a bit, as Lieutenant Colonel Robert Halliday moved from station to station. Patricia homeschooled their daughters and young son Richard, who was multilingual, speaking both Korean and German after studying those languages while living there. He loved to play the piano and was a black belt in karate. His parents describe him as a deep thinker who enjoyed researching and pondering weighty topics in politics, theology, economics, and science. He also was a mystery fan and loved Jackie Chan movies. When he was in his teens, Richard announced that he wanted to join the army to follow in the footsteps of his father and grandfather. Robert retired from the service, and the family lived in Ireland before returning to the U.S. 22-year-old Richard joined the Army in April of 2018 as a private. He went to basic training at Fort Sill in Oklahoma and then was assigned to active duty at Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas. There, he was in D Battery, 143rd Air Defense Artillery Regiment, 11th Air Defense Artillery Brigade, 32nd Army and Air Missile Defense Command, where he served as a launching station maintainer. At first, Richard seemed to do well in the Army, earning 3 Army Achievement Medals in his first 14 months. But after returning from active duty in Qatar in November of 2019, Richard became disenchanted with the drudgery and routine experienced by his unit at Fort Bliss, and disillusioned about Army leadership in general. According to his parents, morale was low, and Richard began expressing a desire to leave the service. He got into a little trouble, racking up a DUI in El Paso, crossing the Mexican border, and violating quarantine rules by leaving the barracks, something the soldiers often did to relieve the tedium. For these relatively minor transgressions, he received what his parents considered excessive punishment, being forced to engage in exercises designed to discipline the men. In early 2020, the Army began the process referred to as chaptering Richard out of the service. He was assigned an escort who was to accompany him everywhere and ensure that he adhered to his restriction of movement order. Richard's service term was due to finish up in late summer of 2020, and he planned to put the Army behind him. Richard's family was in regular contact with him, speaking with him on the phone every week or two. In August, his parents found they could not reach him. Eventually, Robert called someone higher up in the chain of command to try to find out why they had not heard from Richard. At that time, on August 28th, he was told that Richard had gone AWOL on July 23rd. He had last been seen at the barracks, but no one, including his escort who had not been watching him, knew what had happened to him after that. No one even knew for certain whether he had left the base or not. He had been gone for 36 days before his family even knew he was missing. He has not been seen or heard from since. This is directly taken from an Army release, quote, "On July 24, 2020, the day Private Halliday went missing, his unit conducted a series of immediate searches. The unit looked for him at the following locations: the unit's work areas and motor pools, barracks and common areas, installation fitness centers and outdoor recreation areas, and local area hospitals and jails." The release continues in great detail about the searches the Army, assisted by the El Paso Police Department, conducted for Richard over the following months. According to the Army, they searched certain areas of El Paso using electronic geolocation, and 6 square miles surrounding the headquarters of Richard's battalion, pouring over the headquarters building, 80-unit barracks, training sites, and maintenance areas. Then they expanded into West Fort Bliss, focusing on the Installation Rail Operations Center, Sanitary Landfill Road, known sinkholes, water drainages, sewage systems, water canals, and unoccupied buildings. The 200 soldiers and special agents, assisted by Army helicopters, searched parks and recreation areas, including over 20 miles of trails in the Franklin Mountain State Park and Indian Peak. CID agents also canvassed homeless areas and residential areas in El Paso, and a cadaver dog searched 4 miles of McKelligan Canyon. They searched border areas and expanded into areas of New Mexico. Most of these searches were conducted only after Richard's parents raised the alarm about his unknown whereabouts and enlisted the help of a local congresswoman, Veronica Escobar. As soon as Richard was discovered missing by his unit on July 23rd, they officially changed his duty status from present for duty to absent without leave, or AWOL. Then, on August 27th, they changed his status again, this time to the more serious deserter, which is a criminal offense. Yet they still failed to notify Richard's family of his missing status. On August 28th, the deserter status triggered Private Halliday's entry into the National Crime Information Center database, and CID took over the investigation on September 1st. Richard is currently classified as missing after being labeled Dust 1, which stands for Duty Status, Whereabouts Unknown. The Army Times reported that Fort Bliss officials said on September 2nd that Richard, quote, fled his unit deliberately and in violation of orders, end quote. But after the Hallidays started inquiring about the specifics of their son's disappearance, Army officials confirmed that they are no longer certain that Richard left intentionally. Yet, a September 5, 2020 press release by CID states that there was no indication of foul play or suspicious circumstances after a CID forensics team conducted a search of Richard's barracks room using state-of-the-art technology and found nothing of interest or concern. According to Connecting Vets, Richard left behind his passport, but a recently purchased pistol was missing. In a January 14, 2021 Army update issued by Lieutenant Colonel Allie Payne, the news senior mission commander at Fort Bliss acknowledged that the Army had made mistakes in its handling of Richard's case. He said, quote, "We failed to make timely initial contact with the Halliday family when we discovered Private Halliday missing. This failure caused us to lose the trust of the Halliday family. We are working hard to regain their trust. Our failure drove us to change the procedures we take here at Fort Bliss when we discover that a soldier's whereabouts are unknown." On the anniversary of Richard's disappearance, officials at Fort Bliss issued a statement to update the public on the investigation. It reads, quote, "Since assuming control of this investigation, Fort Bliss CID continues to aggressively pursue all credible information. 15 different state, local, and federal agencies continued to commit resources and active support to aid Fort Bliss, 32nd Army Air and Missile Defense Command, and Fort Bliss CID in the search for Private Halliday." The statement claims that CID special agents have thus far employed 65 subpoenas and executed 5 search warrants in their attempts to find out what happened to Richard. His whereabouts remain unknown. When last seen, Richard Halliday was wearing gray or turquoise cargo shorts, a gray t-shirt, and a charcoal gray zip-up hoodie, with dark gray running shoes with red, yellow, and white paint stains. He is 5 foot 9 inches tall and 162 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. The U.S. Army is offering a reward of up to $25,000 for credible information that leads to his whereabouts. His family is offering an additional $11,000. Anyone with information on Richard's whereabouts is asked to call the Fort Bliss CID office at 915-568-1700 or the Fort Bliss Military Police at 915-744-1237. You can also call the family's Find Richard Halliday hotline at 941-677-0060. Mike Morford sat down to talk with Richard Halliday's parents about their son's case. That conversation is coming up after a word from our sponsors.
This podcast is sponsored by Ramp. Look, there's feelings, and then there's the facts. If you're feeling like your finance team is bogged down in mundane manual tasks, the fact is, you need Ramp. Ramp is the corporate card that makes the expense process fast and easy. The moment your team makes a purchase, Ramp handles everything. Receipt collection and approvals, the works. With Ramp, you can cut your month-end close from 5 days to 1, customize approval workflows, and get complete control over every transaction. Facts. Over 25,000 businesses trust Ramp, including Shopify and the Boys & Girls Club of America, which is why they were just named #1 in spend management by G2. Facts. Start using Ramp and you'll have more time to spend scaling your business. And that'll feel really good. Upgrade to Ramp for free today and get $250 at ramp.com. That's ramp.com. RAMP.com.
Cards issued by Sutton Bank, members FDIC. Terms and conditions apply.
I'd like to welcome Patricia and Robert Halliday. They're here to talk about their missing son, Richard. Thank you both for being here with us.
You're more than welcome. Glad to be here.
Thank you for having us on.
And I wish it was under different circumstances. I wish you didn't have to be here trying to spread awareness of your son's case. But as any concerned parent, it seems like you're trying to do everything you can. So we're going to try and help if we can by spreading the word as well. If we could start off, would you be kind enough to tell us a little bit about Richard and a little bit about his background and growing up and what got him to join the Army in the first place?
Well, we adopted Richard and his older brother from Poland. Richard was 5 years old at the time, from Gliwice. He was born in Gliwice, Poland. And we brought him home to us in January 15th. He was born in 1999. So, 2006, January 17th. or 15th, 2006. And we lived in Germany at the time, but we had just purchased a very derelict cottage in Ireland. And so Richard grew up going back and forth from Germany and Ireland. We were going to go to Ireland full time when Rob retired, but because of the whole housing meltdown there, that didn't happen. So we went back and forth because, you know, in Germany you can't homeschool, and we homeschooled. So Richard only spoke Polish when he came home, and so we have a very close family. He never has went to like a school, and he grew up just traveling. Our son-in-law is Korean, and so he even went to Korean language school there. Of course, he went to German language school. You know, he's a black belt in karate, and he plays the piano. He even did the Royal School of Testing there in Ireland to advance in his piano. And of course, Rob is a 30-year vet, so he, we didn't really want him to join the Army, but they waved a lot of money in his face, and we were in Korea at the time, and when he told us, and we said, Richard, we're going to send you a ticket to come to Korea. Let's talk about this. So he came to Korea because our grandson was being born, and so he came and he said that he was going to join. He talked to Opie about it. My dad was ADA, and he was going to go ADA, and so we tried to persuade him not to, but he joined right there from Korea. So we told him, okay, now that you signed your name, do the best you can. And he was number one in basic training, or the distinguished honor graduate of the cycle for basic training, and also for AIT, which is the advanced individual training. That's how that happened.
So he knew about the military life from Bob's background. And by the way, thank you for your family's service to our country. It sounds like he knew what to expect, even though you may have been steering him a little bit away from that career. He wanted to go into the Army, and you mentioned they waved some money at him, and he knew what he was getting into, so he took it on full force, it seems like.
That's correct.
It sounds like he was a really well-rounded, spoke different languages, a black belt, traveling. Seems like he was a very energetic person, someone that wasn't the type of person to sit still. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, that's correct. He was all over the place. He, every country visited, he was doing something. He loved to wander, go off and do walks, and with us or by himself. He would hike, and just to get away. And he enjoyed all the traveling we did in Europe, as part of his education. And he was very energetic and very stubborn. A lot of pride as an 18-year-old. When we tried to dissuade him from joining, but he was dead set on doing what he wanted to do, and so that's. Yeah,
we even offered him money.
We offered him money to go to school, and he would have nothing to do with it. So
he was set. He knew what he wanted.
Once he got in, how well did he adapt, and how did he like it?
Well, I mean, at first, like Pat was saying, he did real well there in his basic training, and his how to, the advanced individual training will teach you how to do your job for your time in the Army, unless you do something else later on. But he did rather well, and even some of the soldiers that knew him have contacted us and said he was well-rounded and helped other people and all that kind of stuff. Then he went to Fort Bliss as his first duty assignment, and right after he got there, they deployed to Qatar for 9-10 months. And that's when things started going downhill. he not personally for him, but he saw leadership issues, and because he had aspirations to maybe do some criminal investigation division work later on.
Yeah, he put in
green to gold. He even thought about going from enlisted to officer, but all that changed, and he had two and a half years left in the Army when things were. And I discussed with him over the phone when he was in Qatar. I said, "You just hang in there and take care of yourself, and you can get out, easily. Just do your thing. You're a good soldier. Just try to stay out of trouble, So, but the leadership was an issue with him. He even right after they got back from Qatar, the leadership in the unit was not doing him justice. So he even asked for transfer from the unit to another unit, and that was rejected, as well as volunteering to go back downrange for another tour. That was rejected. He made E4 real quick. He made it below the zone, they call it, where he had to have a waiver to get promoted early, and he was up to E4. But by that time he definitely wanted to leave the Army. But he even visited us in 2000. Was that 19 or 18?
August 2019.
19, yeah. Mm-hmm. 2019 in August. He came to visit us for 8 days, and he really didn't talk about the military much. He didn't want to. I don't know how much he did with his brother or sisters, but...
Well, they told me. He would talk about anything, but he said, don't talk about the Army.
Right. So we had a great time those 8 days, and he went back, and then things started going downhill for him, but we were unaware. He did not let us know things were going south for him at all. Okay. And then we're coming to, so that's like October, November 2019 when things were starting to go, maybe a little bit before that.
January 25th is really that weekend of the DUI.
Yeah, but I'm talking about where we started meeting that lady in the fall.
We don't even know that, though.
Whoa, okay. We
don't even know that, though. There's no proof to that, really. It's weird. It's just so weird.
Things have, as we discussed this case, what we were told at the beginning have definitely changed since then.
Yep, we're always reviewing.
And that makes perfect sense to do that and not just stand by one thing, but be open to sifting what comes in. I'd like to back up for 1 second, if I could. The last time you heard from your son, was his state of mind okay? Did he seem like he was depressed or anything like that? Or was he just disenchanted with the military? Did it progress to something that, you were worried about his mental health maybe?
Well, when I talked to him,
the wedding.
The wedding, but even after the wedding, because, his brother got married and he wasn't allowed to come because of the COVID.
He was supposed to be the best man.
Right. And so the day of the wedding, we just live streamed with him almost the whole day. We just tried to talk to him. Everyone tried to, include him. And after that, though, the big deal.
2020.
Yeah. The big deal was really everything with COVID and all the issues surrounding that. And we had, because Rob was a physician assistant in the Army. So, of course, when all of this came up, we started researching together to see what was going on. And we were sharing all that information. So he seemed very mentally sound with us during every phone call. And he was like, yeah, I know, Mom. I know this is what you're saying. And I said, I'm going to put together a package with a lot of vitamins. Make sure you take these vitamins, Richard, that kind of stuff. That's what I was talking to him about. And I always stuck money in there on his favorite goodies that he liked. When you're military family, you're very used to packing these care packages. So you know what to put in the care. I don't know how many boxes of care packages that I helped put together for soldiers. So that was just a natural thing for me. And I put it together with all kinds of stuff and gave him directions. And then, he was talking to Hannah that same day, I remember.
Yeah, mainly it was leadership and being not happy with what his immediate supervisors were doing, and so he kind of changed he did like a 180. I don't want to be E5. I don't want to be one of those leaders that because they don't get paid much more than I do, and
wasn't he acting a higher rate? He was doing some platoon.
Yeah, he was acting like a squad or a platoon leadership position, because his immediate supervisor was in LA when this all started, and they told him to stay there until as far as the lockdown, until further notice. So Richard had to take his duties. I don't know what kind of duties they were, because they weren't really doing too much during that time. So a lot of counseling and a lot of paperwork, he said. But every phone call would just tell him just to hang in there and do what he has to do and just get out.
And how long had he been in by this point?
2020, year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's fair to say that he was becoming disenchanted with at least parts of the Army.
Correct.
Enough so that it was changing perhaps his mind. He was maybe going to be looking to get out.
Exactly.
It wasn't that he was changing parts, because he was so excited, and you can even look at the pictures and see it for yourself. He was so excited when my parents came to the graduation, and my dad and him had talked to his platoon, the drill sergeant, and he was going to go to green to gold, and he was going to do this, and he started clipping again, because he had clipped out of college math when he was 15. Then he clipped out of foreign language. And so now and we even have the paperwork that he applied to clip out again. And then he got he did just a 180. Something happened, and it was like, I don't want anything to do with the military. I just want to get out.
And how far away was he from being able to walk away from?
2.5 years.
So if he could have made it that 2.5 year time frame, he could have just walked away from the military. We're going to get into it a little bit, but he's eventually classified as being missing without permission, I guess, which is in the Army or any branch of the military, I guess, not something that is welcomed. If he had a way out coming up, it doesn't make sense, at least to me, that he would go AWOL when he could just bide his time and then leave on his own.
Well, part of this case is also very interesting, because in January he was arrested for DWI. Now, he pleaded not guilty in that, and it was dismissed, but he got a GOMER for that, which is a General Order Memorandum of Reprimand, which is kind of like a slap on the wrist, but his was different. His was signed by the general. It was made permanent, and so it would stay in his record. So that would be very hurtful for him if he did want to stay in or get promoted. But also, now we don't have a definitive answer on this, but I was just contacted to say, if he got a permanent GOMER, then that could be the cause of why they were chaptering him, because they started chaptering him out of the Army in April. He went missing the 23rd of July. He only had a day or days left to get out of the Army. Why would he go AWOL?
Yeah, that's pretty puzzling if he has a chance to get out at that point. why disappear willingly just right before then?
Right. It was other than honorable discharge, which I don't think, because of the field grade Article 15, the SJA told Rob and I, and Rob kind of pinned him about this chaptering, when the chaptering started. And he wouldn't tell us the exact date, but he told Rob April. He did cave enough to tell us the month. And Richard's field grade Article 15 hearing wasn't until the second or the end of the first week in May. So they started chaptering him before the field grade Article 15 hearing for the border incident or patterns of misconduct, right? So it never really made sense to us until this person wrote us about the GOMER, and I checked it, and sure enough, if it's a permanent GOMER, they can start chaptering you out. So that filled that hole up for us, definitely.
Let's go back to the time that July when he did go missing. How did you find out about it, and what were you told when you did find out?
Okay, he went missing on the 23rd, and it's supposed to have been witnessed, okay, by this soldier that was supposed to be watching Richard. Okay, so what we do is we left Richard alone. I mean, he's an adult, but we try to talk to him every 2 weeks via some kind of communication, social media or phone call or whatever. Most of the time it was Facebook Messenger, audio and some visual. But about mid-August, we were having a hard time getting a hold of him. So I said, well, maybe he's in the field training. So I didn't think too much about it. Then finally, it was like 10, 11, 12, 15 more days passed. So we're at the end of August. And I said, well, he's got to be out of the field by now. And we can't get a hold of him. So let's contact the unit. So I called the battalion staff duty NCO, and they forwarded me to the first sergeant, actually the battery commander. And I had him on the phone. He said, sir, your son's a deserter. So that's the first we heard, 36 days after he went or considered AWOL or deserter. Because you're AWOL for 30, and after 30, if you don't come in, then you're a deserter. Then you're a criminal. You're a federal.
You're off the rolls.
You're off the rolls, and the feds are looking for you as well, civilians and local police as well. Your son is deserter, and the battery commander was kind of shaky. And I felt like he was going to start crying because apparently they couldn't get a hold of us.
Yeah, that sounds very strange that they couldn't. There's you write you a letter, make a phone call, come in person. It's very strange. Is that unusual for them to not be able to? This is the military we're talking about. There's no way they could contact you.
Well, CID said when we first talked to CID, they find my name and phone number on the internet in less than a minute. So there are protocols, to be honest and straightforward. There are protocols with the military when you go AWOL, because most soldiers do return to their unit when they're AWOL, generally speaking. Okay, and a lot of them go home. Okay, and then return. And if they do within the 30 days, they'll get in trouble, but it won't be as bad as being a deserter. You're a criminal as a deserter. And, but of course, as time goes on, we found out that there was no witness. They don't know what happened. He vanished out of the barracks on the 23rd or 22nd of July, 2020. They don't know what happened to him. Now, that's what they tell us. Out of his room. That's what they tell us. So nobody in that barracks, there's 2 batteries in that barracks. Nobody knows what happened to Richard. But
troubling. And maybe you can give us a little bit of a layout. So he's in the barracks and sort of open areas, open buildings, but not the kind of place where you could just walk into just off the street. I assume they had some kind of level of security there. Would that be correct?
That's correct. The doors open into the hallway there's like 2-man rooms, and there's CQs or charge of quarters at the base of the stairs at the entrance and exit of the barracks.
Mm-hmm. But also there was added, because it was COVID, they were locked in.
Right.
And so they had doors sealed.
Right.
We were told that the back door that was sealed had been unsealed, and soldiers were putting little stones in the back so that they could leave. Because if they went through the front, they would have to give a bribe that they, to the CQ to not report them if they wanted to go see a girlfriend or go out and meet friends or whatever, just to go out in their own country. Yeah. And those bribes, the racketeering, we heard $80 a pop, but for Delta Battery, because Delta Battery was considered the undesirable, also that's just what we heard. And so they had to pay over $80. So, I'm a math person. We're like, okay, that's about $20,000-$30,000 a month. When we reported that, they did a 15-6, but the 15-6 was not a very good investigation because they never even checked anyone's bank accounts to see if that was at all true, that they were racketeering the soldiers.
And what is a 15-6 exactly?
It's an investigation, a local investigation that's directed by a higher officer to look at a unit, see how they're doing.
And my dad, he told us that that's going to come out to be nothing because none of those lower enlisted soldiers are going to talk to an officer. Because he used to be, when he was an E5, he used to work for a general, and he would go and talk to all of the lower enlisted soldiers and report back to the general what was going on, because no officer would be able to get information to see what was going on.
You've got this mini investigation that doesn't really go anyplace. You've got just the fact that he's in this barracks with these in lockdown with probably even more people than would be there normally, and nobody sees anything. That's pretty troubling.
But they didn't take it seriously, because when we got there in September to El Paso, we were told that this is by the command sergeant major, Jake Jacobitz. He told us, and it was like no big deal. I mean, he was kind of proud of it, that they were bringing in girls into the barracks during the COVID lockdown to help out with the morale. And so then I checked sources, and they were like, oh yeah, the girls were lined up. Even when the visitor center was closed and no visitors were allowed, the girls would wait there in the parking lot, and the cars would come around and pick them up and take them. And then from the Brigadier General Stewart, he told us that when he got there, because he was very new when we got there. He was not there when Richard was there. And he said that he had to do an inspection on these barracks, and the barracks were flooded with weapons. And that's a no-no, and then our sources were saying that the soldiers were afraid for their lives, and they would have pistols and other weapons in the barracks, under their pillow, hidden away to protect themselves.
Who were they afraid of, supposedly?
That's a good question. When you see what happened to Richard, I guess you could make assumptions. And when you know everything that was going on there, Richard went missing the 23rd of July. Something was going on in the military, because in April, Vanessa Guillen was bludgeoned, chopped up, beheaded, buried. That's April. May, Enrique Roman Martinez, his head came to shore, and it was not a clean-cut beheading. It was brutal. And then in June, Austin Hawk was murdered in his barracks room by his former sergeant that had been getting into some trouble, and Austin Hawk put in an IG complaint about him. He was kicked out of the Army. A couple months later, he had conspired with another soldier in the barracks, came on to Fort Stewart, this is in Georgia, got into the barracks. There was no forced entry. So that trial hasn't happened yet, but they've been arrested. And he was stabbed 40 times. It was so brutal. When they went to pick up his body, his head fell off. And then Richard goes missing the next month. We find out in August that he's, a deserter. We had to put in that complaint, try to put in a missing persons. Finally, we got the fugitive apprehension group to come to our house. We were celebrating that. I mean, can you believe it? Just that someone would pay attention that our son was missing. And I was getting sent all kinds of stuff. Of course, Hannah, since Rob was doing all the paperwork and I was doing the media, the social media, to try to get some information, what was going on. And I'm hearing about all these things. And then Richard's former first sergeant says, "Oh, you heard about Vanessa Guillen. Well, I just want to assure you this is not that." And told us that our son had slit his wrists and more and more. This is his first sergeant. So then we find out through the hospital what really happened was a superficial cut to his upper arm. And, so then that's when the trust started fading with the military. It was with the first sergeant and his remarks to us. And, and then the CID not responding to what was going on in the military at that time and what we were getting, this information that we were getting, and knowing who our son is, and then them coming and saying, Richard is just this big criminal. Well, if he's this big criminal, why didn't you contact us? Why didn't you send the fugitive apprehension unit to us sooner? It's just been, it gets even wilder than that. Because what happened with the border incident, the PAO, who's the general public affairs office, so she's the mouth of the general there at Fort Bliss. And she called us up. She was very shaky, near tears. And because the media, of course, was contacting us, and Stars and Stripes had contacted her for remarks. And she called me up and said, "Are you ready to hear about your son?" And I said, "Of course I am. I want to hear about my son." And she goes, "He got caught at the border with a weapon." Which was, when you hear that, you think, okay, what kind of criminal activity was he in, right? Because that's the way it was told to us, with nothing else, just those words. And that's why he got this field grade Article 15, because he got caught at the border with a weapon. And we were like, oh my gosh, what did he do? And then with time, we have found out what happened at the border. He came back from the field on the 27th of March and had bought a rifle that he had talked to Rob about, and went, because of COVID, you really couldn't go, he really loved to go bowling. He was a great swimmer. Everything that he liked to do, you couldn't go do, but you could go shooting out in the desert. You go out to these old quarries and you can go shooting there. So he had talked to Rob about getting a rifle. He picked up his rifle on the 27th of March. We confirmed that. We have his receipt and everything. On the 28th, to the car, and there's lots of construction going on there at Fort Bliss. And there's very easy. Everybody does it. We even talked to the construction foreman. You get caught in that traffic pattern, and it takes you to the Bridge of Americas, and you have to make a U-turn there. That was the border incident. He wanted to make a U-turn. He self-reported, but because he was a soldier and because he had a weapon with him, they had to confiscate his weapon. They had to arrest him. They had to turn him over to the military. The military sent a quarantine wagon for him, took him to William Beaumont to be tested for COVID. It was negative. And on that statement said he was at the border briefly and never crossed over. Well, the Army maintains that he crossed over into Mexico. But for that incident, he and for the incident in January, which he got a counseling slip for a 0.04 BAC, which is like nothing, a squirt of mouthwash or whatever. They gave him a field grade Article 15 with maximum punishment, wearing full battle gear during his 45 days of extra duty. They took away 3 ranks. They took away 50% of his pay for 2 months. Of course, his 45 days of extra duty and restrictions. And then they made him wear, in the desert, June weather, full battle gear with a mask, 4 hours of sleep. They told us because of COVID, you got a little extra sleep.
All troubling stuff is, and maybe Rob would be the one to answer this question. For this to be like a punishment, it sounds like an over punishment. Would this take one person to make his life hell like this, or would this take going up the ladder, several people to make his life a hell like this?
Probably one level, because it would have his battery commander involved. I mean, the battery commander could have handled this situation with the Uniform Code of Military Justice just at his level. It wouldn't have been as severe, but he could have handled it. Richard never had any company grade kind of punishment. It went from a counseling statement all the way to a battalion commander field grade Article 15 masks. There's no way that should happen. We've been told there's some issues with this battalion commander and sergeant major of his battalion, but there's little we can do about that. But but Richard did sign. You could see his signature on for this field grade, but I don't know if he was coerced, because you have an option to go to court-martial and take your chances there. But they probably scared him, saying, "Hey, you could go to prison for 6 years if you're found guilty and given a max punishment with a court-martial for what you've done." And really, the things that happened to him were very minor and should have been handled at the company grade. But I don't know. It seems like this is just a Rob Halliday. During COVID, he was out and about, and they wanted to make him the example for the rest of the troops. Even though he didn't disobey an order, because they were allowed to go out for food, and why not go shoot your weapon? I mean, anyway, so it's very, very, very hard to make a stand for what happened to him with all these other levels below that they could have done to help him out. Because, they didn't really, UCMJ is supposed to take the soldier that's kind of going astray and bring him back. What they did to him is they just ruined his career. They wanted him out of there. So why? What did he see, or what was he threatening, or something, or whatever. There's all kinds of mischievous, nefarious things going on with gangs, not only outside of the base, but on the base. These soldiers are in gangs, and he could have seen something, And so
I think a lot of us maybe envision a military base as being the secure, perfect, well-oiled machine. Everyone does what they are supposed to. Everyone's following all the rules. And at the end of the day, it sounds like anytime you get a group of people together, you're going to have some bad apples in the bunch that may have been up to no good.
that's correct. And that occurred during my career. So maybe not as bad, or maybe I didn't see it, but there was all kinds of stuff like that happening. In fact, the Criminal Investigation Division, when I was in the military and the younger person in the military, they would plant CID agents in the units to see what was going on. Now, it was a soldier that you were familiar with, but maybe they got in trouble, and CID offered him a deal if they would just keep an eye on what was going on in that unit, and so they could inform them of what was happening. So, yeah, I mean, it's not a perfect world, and it's definitely not a perfect world in the military. All kinds of people, just like it's the only difference is they wear a uniform with rank.
Mm-hmm. But there is, in Richard's paperwork, he had 2 big packets of all the regulations for the barracks, and I read through it. Number one, I think it's unattainable. They make it, there's so many restrictions that how are you going to enforce all of it? But in the case there in his barracks, from our sources, all the soldiers that we talked to, it was not being enforced at all. And you can tell by just the command sergeant major telling us they brought in girls. Then you have a big alcohol problem, a lot of illegal drug problems, a lot of rape problems, a lot of hazing, lots of hazing. Before, when you're new to El Paso, your battle buddies, your new unit or whatever, will duct tape you to a chair and pour tequila down your throat, or they will duct tape your ankles and drag you through the barracks naked, shoving LSD paper down your throat. These are just a couple stories that we heard, and it's, it is a need for an investigation, because even the brigadier general told us the barracks were awash with weapons. That's not regular. That's not following regulations. And so the barracks are supposed to be, quote, a place where the soldier wants to live, unquote.
And there's evidence of a lot of stuff going on there that maybe would make a soldier not want to live there.
Absolutely, 100%.
Huh. And so you've had to process all this. You've had to go through all this. You went through maybe an investigation that wasn't the best, didn't lead to any answers, certainly. When you can't get answers from someone like the military, as big as they are, do you have any option of going to local police and maybe they can do something outside of the military ranks that they can look at the case from another perspective?
Only since it happened on federal land, and the Criminal Investigation Division, CID, is in charge. They are in charge of the investigation. They can ask sister law enforcement outside the military to help, like the FBI, the city police, the county sheriff department, all things like that. But they have to ask. Mm-hmm. And so far, the FBI and those other agencies have done very little, because CID, they're still investigating, and they feel like they don't need their help.
Right. And when we were there in El Paso, they were telling us about this girl that was involved with Richard, and And, they even told us that Richard proposed marriage to her. And I said, well, I'd really like to talk to her. And he said, well, she doesn't want to talk to you. And I said, well, that's odd. That's suspicious. Why doesn't she want to talk to us? Richard's missing. If we're close. So we didn't know who she was. She didn't want to talk to us. A year went by. By the grace of God, we found out who she was, who she is, because she's very important in this, because she's contacted Richard and had communication with Richard multiple times on the day that he disappeared, the 23rd of July. So she's very, very important in all of this. And I called her up on her phone. She answered. She hung up on me. I called her mother. Her mother talked to me for a little bit. I called her father. He would not talk to me. So the CID got wind that we knew who she was, and set up a 3-way phone call. And we spent 2 hours speaking with her. And at the end of the phone call, go ahead, Ron.
What do you mean?
You and what did we think about the end of the phone call?
At the end of the phone call, we determined that this young lady may have had some kind of affair with Richard, but she did not know our son.
No.
She couldn't tell us anything about him.
Right. No, he has body markings. She couldn't identify them. She couldn't identify a story. She had no proof of any kind of picture. She had said that she showed him all around El Paso, all the famous sites and everything. She had not one picture of the two of them together. No text messaging to show that there was any kind of friendship. She said she deleted it all. And yet on the 23rd of July, she had spoke to him. And we hung up and we're like, this is crazy. If you would have let us talk to her at the beginning, we would have told you she doesn't know Richard. I mean, she was so off the mark when she talked about Richard. And plus, she's a criminal. No.
It almost seems as if she's someone that on paper had a relationship with him, but in real life, there was no connection between the two.
Right. And yet she claims that he was using multiple illegal drugs. And we had to endure so many very bad rumors about Richard. And we just wanted to get proof. We still don't have any proof. And one person commented, his name is Anthony Swafford, that he knew Richard's character, and he had hurt women, and he was a pimp and a prostitute, and what else did he do?
Gun runner,
or no, I can't remember. That might have been another one. But anyway, all these different bad things. And so we looked up who this Anthony Swafford is, and he's an MP for Fort Bliss. And he was asked, well, where did you get this information? And he said, guard mount. So from the MP guard mount on Fort Bliss, the military police guard mount, which is the change of shift, a senior NCO, you give awards, you tell them what's going on base, you do inspections during that time. From the MP guard mount on Fort Bliss, he heard these rumors about Richard. Well, that just floored us. For one, you don't do that when you're in law enforcement. And it's like, okay, so did they launch a smear campaign from an MP guard mount to the MPs there in El Paso? Because what this soldier did is with that information, he went on to his social media site of the Fort Bliss housing, and where they were talking about helping us find Richard and going to our rallies. And he was dissuading the people and shaming the people, the spouses and the soldiers, from coming and talking to us and helping us. And, so it's like, really? What's going on? That was a very, very bad day when we learned that.
Well, so there's a lot of rumor and stuff and nothing based in fact going around.
Exactly. 80 subpoenas. The last we heard, and that was months ago, they had conducted 80 subpoenas and warrants on Richard. 80. Not 20, not 30, not 50, not 70, 80 subpoenas. He's the most scrutinized soldier. And when we petitioned them to designate him as missing, they tried to talk us out of designating him missing because as a deserter, he was a criminal and they could arrest him if they found him.
And you sort of touched on it a little earlier when you mentioned social media and calls and stuff. Was there any checking into anything that you know of his social media, his phone, any of that to try and figure out where he might have wound up? Any clues to him going missing?
That's part of those 80 subpoenas and warrants. On June 17th, there was a video that he made, posted up onto an Instagram called Rocky in Texas, which the CID told us that it belonged to him, that Instagram page. And it only had one thing on it, and it was this video, and only one friend, and that was the girl. And the video was up there, and they, we were notified, hey, watch this video of Richard. And Richard was burning money, $100 bills, which people don't know, but Richard loved Hollywood money. And when he was down in Naples, he bought some Hollywood money, and he worked at a daycare center there as an apprentice learning management of daycare. And he would give the kids $100 bills, which, on the back says Hollywood money, right? Only to use in Hollywood, right? And so this money that he was burning was Hollywood money, $100 bills. And he was saying that he rather burn his money than give it to for sexual favors. Those weren't his exact words, but that's what he meant in that video. And I have that video, but shortly after that, about a month after that, all of a sudden it disappeared. The account and everything, it just disappeared. We don't know what happened.
It's very strange, and just a list of strange things that have happened. Recently, I know there was a search done in Mexico. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that came to be, why they looked there, and what was found, if anything?
So we received a lead that Richard was seen by a CBP agent, which is Customs Border Protectors. No, it's not the Patrol Protectors, Police. And that he was really distraught, seemed like he was on drugs or something like that, and had been shot by his own pistol because on July 17th, he bought a pistol. So that's like a week before he disappeared. That he was shot with his own pistol, and he was buried at kilometer 2930, and the GPS was given to us and everything. So we turned that all into the CID, and the CID said, no, this is just because we don't have the name of the Customs Patrol Protector, we can't do this, and the FBI won't do it. And so we put together a campaign, raised money. We had 50 volunteers. We hired a bus. We hired a truck. We had equipment. We paid for all the food and the drink and T-shirts and everything for these volunteers. And we searched that area. We had paperwork from Mexico City that allowed us to search this area. And the attorney even came to the place, and we had media there, and we had an after action report because The locals had said bodies had been removed and around October from this area that even had the caution tape still there. The dog that the team had even smelled cadaver there. We also found a voting registration ID that we don't know who this man is there at that area. We turned in our whole after action report to the CID, and the day before the search, the Mexican officials or police had contacted Rob and asked Rob to stop the search, do not do the search. That, didn't he say like 100 people he would have?
Yeah, he would get more people to help. Eventually.
And more dogs, and that he would do a proper search, better than what we could do. And he talked to Rob for a long time, and afterwards we had 2 witnesses about them removing the bodies. We tried to have them go to the Mexican officials. They never showed up. There were some death threats to some of our searchers. We have this call then, or this text message from our contact there in Mexico, or Juarez, that told Rob, we will do now a small search, like an after action report. And CID called us up and said, oh no, that was a hack. That never happened. It wasn't a good lead, the CID said, even though it was given to the FBI. And the thing that bothers me about that is Rob and I had talked to General McConville, who's the 4-star general, and he had Major General Donna Martin. She's a 3-star now, but at the time she was a 2-star and ahead of the CID. And he told us that he was sending down Major General Donna Martin to form a task force, find Richard Halliday, and that they would get together 15 plus agencies to help look for Richard. And so she came down. This happened on November 9th, 2020. And when we got there, we were all dressed up, and we brought 2 people with us, which they didn't want, but we insisted. And they were all in civilian clothing, the military part of this task force. Even the 2-star generals were in civilian clothing. This was very, very odd. And, we were told that just to make us feel more comfortable. And they conducted this task force, and she sat in the middle of all of us. We had a social distance and everything. And she was even Indian style in her chair, like we're at a picnic. But she told us there, we have notes, because we brought a note keeper, that the Army would leave no lead unturned, that they would help us with every lead. Yet, they did not help us with this lead. They didn't even provide, because the FBI or the State Department there in Juarez could have asked the Mexican officials just to even provide us with some protection, because that area is a known gang area, and they didn't even do that.
Very troubling. It's so, your son's been missing all this time. The military is not, there's a lot of things on their end that leave a lot to be desired, or maybe point to something happening within their ranks. How do you go from here? Where do you go from here when it's almost like the fox is guarding the hen house? Where do you turn to at this point? What do you do?
Pray. A lot of praying. And, our faith tells us even the stars in their course fought against Sisera. So we have found out about the Dollar General man, who is the father-in-law of a lieutenant colonel in the G3 of Richard's battalion that came into the Dollar General on the 26th of October, 2020. So a week before this stage task force, that's what I call it, the stage task force, and said that the FBI had been looking for Richard in 5 different places in Juarez, and they had found Richard, and Richard, it was bad news. Richard was dead. He told that to the cashier. The cashier called us up. In less than an hour, we got there. We just went right there when she called us. And we got CCTV footage. We got her witness testimony on video. We gave all of that to the CID. We did not know who this man was. And for months, we did not know who he was. And we were told that it was no big deal, nothing to worry about, nothing to think about what he said. It was not true. When, through the grace of God, we figured out who this man is, I called him up. Rob was driving in the truck. I called him up. We couldn't believe it, right? And he admitted to everything. And that's how we found out that his son-in-law is a lieutenant colonel in the G3. G3 is like the wedding planner. That's where they do the op-ord. That's where they know everything going on in the 32nd AdCom. So that he was in the G3 of Richard's battalion, that makes the hair rise on your back of your neck. And we were told it was nothing. Clearly, the CID lied to us because they couldn't even level with us and say, well, this is a father-in-law of someone important, but he just overspoke or something, you know?
So where does the case need help now? What questions are you still hoping are answered? Obviously, one being where's your son, but what things do you think you need clarity on here that would help you move along with your personal investigation?
Yeah, we're kind of like at the end of the tug of war, but
with the Army,
you know, they're like, if it was a football score, they'd be 80, we'd be 0. So we're trying the congressional route. We may have a meeting with a representative here and locally for South Carolina coming up here pretty soon to try to get congressional within the Congress to work this issue and investigate. But the Army is doing their thing, and they really don't have anything else to tell us. They want to keep rehashing stuff, but they don't have anything new to tell us. And we tried the private investigator route. That was a wash because really you can't work with the CID.
He did. So this private investigator,
but I mean,
he took our money and worked for the CID. Well, it seemed like that to us. That was such a bad thing. Oh my gosh! So we have a petition right now to get the donation money back for Team Find Richard Halliday from this private investigator.
What we need is for some soldiers to have enough courage to come forward and say something, but it's not there.
Is there any way that they can anonymously, without risk to them or risk to their military careers, share information?
They're always offered that, but it's say one thing, do another. Mm-hmm. They're too afraid, and they've seen it where somebody's been offered that. What's the word for it? Immunity, and it hurt them. I mean, even within the military, there's a way to do things anonymously, like through the IG and stuff like that. But it seems like they always find out who the person is, and they get ostracized. And
sure,
yeah, it's terrible.
Right, and Richard had put in IG complaints. Were all over the barracks because of Richard, and Richard also put in a Child Protective Service complaint about Boleyn. So we would like to know why, and that's why we hired the private investigator to maybe fill in some of the blanks, some of the questions. That didn't happen. And so maybe that we can get a congressional investigation in on this, because the soldiers, who we met there, were very afraid, actually shaking. So that's bad news. That's bad news for our military. I've never seen anything like it going on bases, and I grew up on bases. I was born at White Sands. So my dad was ADA. We were at Bliss.
So you're both of you coming from a military background, military families. This is, it seems like this would have left a mark on you, something that you've given so much of your lives towards the military, for them to not come through for you and hoping you'll find your son. It's got to be very frustrating. If there's someone out there listening right now that maybe is in the area down in the bases down there, or can share this on social media, what can they do? What sites can they direct people to? Is there some place you'd like to promote? Any social media or websites that can help with information?
Our hotline number is 941-677-0060. So 941-677-0060. And of course, they can go to if you just search Find Richard Halliday, so many things will pop up. I'm trying to keep it all alive by doing 2 live streams a day. Because, Enrique's case is a cold case now. Richard just disappeared right there from the barracks. And we're just trying to get the time for this insanity to pass, that some of those soldiers will finally get the courage to tell us what they know. Because there's been such a smear campaign. Let us just know what happened, good, bad, or ugly. That's what we've said.
I think you deserve to know what happened to your son. He went into the military to serve his country, and no matter what happened, you deserve to know the truth, whatever that truth may be. And the fact you're not getting all the answers that you should be getting is just very, very frustrating. And I hope that somehow, some way, you do find out and get the information you're looking for.
Thank you. Yeah, that's our goal. We would like to end this, good or bad. And you think a military that could find Saddam Hussein in a hole, or Osama bin Laden, why can't they find a young soldier? It's totally. I mean, if he would have went missing on during a war or during a skirmish, they stopped. They stopped the whole war to go look for this person, the missing person.
Yeah.
But it's very frustrating, like you said, and it's heartbreaking, and it ages us all probably quicker than we want to be, and we just would like to have some kind of closure.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Missing Persons. If you can provide any information to help solve the case we discussed in this episode, please contact the appropriate authorities.
If you enjoy this podcast, please take a moment to tell your friends about Missing Persons and invite them to listen to the show. Word of mouth will help us grow and bring these cases to a larger audience. You can also help us by taking a moment to rate and review Missing Persons on the platform you're listening to us now on.
We'd like to tell you a little bit about our Patreon program. If you visit patreon.com/missingpodcast, you can sign up to help this podcast through ongoing monthly support. As a thank you, we'll give you an on-air shout-out, a thank you card and sticker, plus you'll get early access to ad-free episodes of the show and any bonus content.
Your Patreon support also goes towards helping the missing, because every dollar that we earn through Patreon will be split with charlieproject.org, the wonderful website that's been sharing information about so many missing persons cases for years. We hope you'll consider supporting the show. Just a reminder that new episodes of Missing Persons air every other Saturday. If you want to find us on social media, you can search Facebook for Missing Persons Podcast. And we're also on Twitter with the handle @missing_pod. And of course, you can find us on our website, missingpersonspodcast.net. As we wrap up this episode, we'd like to play a preview of a true crime podcast we think you'll like. It's called Seriously Mysterious. Be sure to give it a listen. On behalf of Jess Betancourt, this is Mike Morford saying thanks, and we'll see you next time on Missing Persons.
My name is John Lorden, and I've been looking into hundreds of unsolved mysteries over the past 5 years on my YouTube channel, Lorden Arts. And I've been known to bring a respectful, victim-focused approach to the stories that I cover while donating thousands of dollars directly to those cases and the charities that help them. Now, I'm bringing that approach and sensibility, along with some of the biggest mysteries I've ever looked into and some new ones, to a weekly podcast called Seriously Mysterious. From bizarre occurrences to unsolved murders and unexplainable disappearances, everything is fair game on this show as long as it's seriously mysterious. You can find Seriously Mysterious on your favorite podcatchers or by visiting seriouslymysterious.com. Let's look into the mysterious together.
Missing Persons is produced under the name AbJack Entertainment by Mike Morford and Jessica Betancourt. It's hosted by Mike Morford and Jessica Betancourt, with writing and research by Jessica Betancourt and editing by Mike Morford. Be sure to listen every other Saturday for an all-new episode of Missing Persons.